and welcome back, guys, to the Big Gay Overalls podcast. This is episode 9, and I'm not going to bore you with all of my usual preamble because today, super excited to have a really amazing guest who stuck up their hand and said they'd love to come and have a chat on this little podcast. So, Jillian Abby, welcome.
Thank you. I mean, how do I not jump at the opportunity to be on Big Gay Overalls? It's the best name I've ever heard of.
The name does say it all. And for those that don't know, Jillian, she is an amazing author of the book Perfectly Queer, which was published by Hay House. Get it on Kindle, all your online stores. You can get it paper, hardback, I'm sure, whatever you want, but just get it. I've started reading it. It's amazing. You're also a speaker, podcaster, professional storyteller. You have many strings to your bow.
I sure do. I mean, I just had to make my resume the other day for a project I was working on. And it's a mess. It's kind of like when the dog gets into the trash bin and tears everything apart, because I started as a certified public accountant.
Right.
And then realized that didn't really seem to align with who I was, even though I was good at it. And so then I switched and became a licensed massage therapist.
Completely opposite end of the spectrum.
Right, exactly. I was like, what is the opposite of accounting? Okay. Yeah. And then I had kids and I homeschooled them for a while. And then the craft beer bar scene was blowing up in the state of Florida in the United States where I live. And so we said, well, why don't we open a craft beer bar? And because why not?
Why not?
Right. And so my entire life has been a very kind of winding path. But the purpose was always looking for fulfillment, like feeling an emptiness inside and saying, okay, I know that this isn't it. So what is it? Spoiler alert, it's gay.
And, some people never even pursue that, then keep looking for the next thing. So you're like, oh, I'll try this, till you eventually figure it out. It's like, what's the thing that's going to make me feel that wholeness and that sense of purpose? You're right. And some people just ignore that and go, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. And they stick at that, because you're right. When it comes to putting together a resume and you've got like pieces here and they don't really seem to fit, you're like, well, who's going to want to hire me on that? Because it doesn't look like I can stick at one thing. So we're so worried about what everybody else thinks or their perception that we then go, I'm just going to stay here. I'll just do this thing. I started it. I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah. In my book, I talk about climbing to the top of supposed to mountain. Like I did all of the things that everyone told me would make me happy, would make me fulfilled. I had married my college sweetheart, who was my one and only boyfriend. We were together almost 20 years. Like I said, we had 2 kids, which I homeschooled. We ran a small business together. We had the house in the suburbs, the white fence, the adopted rescue pet. And I remember reaching that point and going, oh my gosh, like if this is life, how do I keep doing this? Because I just felt so empty. And honestly, that was a huge motivation for sharing the book.
And that's it's a big thing for, to get to that point and realize I'm not thriving, I'm just existing. Like that was a really, that's a big question, is like, if this is life, like really
what's the point? What are we here for?
If this is it, like, where do I go from here? Or why do I even keep going? Like, I'm doing the things, I'm ticking the boxes, but I just feel, removed from the whole experience.
Right. And the thing is I looked at coworkers of mine who truly loved accounting and wanted to stay in that field and did stay in that field for a very long time. And I would always look at people who followed the traditional path and think, what's wrong with me? Like, why did I get dropped here from another planet? Like, why does it feel like I am uncomfortably walking around in this human suit right now because everything that they said should work is not working for me? I have since realized, since I came out and part of the process of divorcing my husband is I had to find new work. And so I figured, well, since I'm already at rock bottom and I'm starting over again, like I've always loved writing, and why
Mm.
not try to do that? And so I actually started a business as a copywriter, writing for businesses. And then that kind of turned into storytelling and ghostwriting for different corporate executives, and writing feel good stories for companies. And, and then the book was like the icing on the cake that was totally unexpected. And so for the first time in my life, like this is the longest I've ever stayed in one type of work, because I'm like, no, this feels good. This feels right.
Yep.
But it took
And
me.
it fits with your authentic self. Like this is me. And it's easy then, because then it's not really work, is it? You're just pursuing passion projects, like, and having that outlet for the things that make you, fill your cup.
Yes. I mean, the fact that I get to do most of my work with sweatpants on, that I can get up whenever I want to and walk outside to my banana garden and check on, like, pull weeds and like dig in the dirt for a bit. This is great. Like I had no idea that this was an option in life. And so it just feels really good to finally start listening to my intuition of just do this next right step. Just do this next right step. And since I've been listening to my intuition instead of my ego brain, really, it's incredible how things are working out.
Yeah. And I used to talk to, and I used to practice it myself. I should be more mindful about it, but being very intentional, like every day I'd put an intention for the day. So today I will be, open to new opportunities and proactive. And I wouldn't necessarily consciously think about it for the day, but it was be amazing what would cross my desk on that day.
Yeah.
In the business I was running at the time. And, when you're operating from a space where you're being truly you, you can't not be successful in that point, because you're giving yourself the grace to go with something that you truly align with. And then people pick up on that. Like people can tell if you're, starting a project or something just for the outcome of selling something or making money out of it or whatever, like people pick up on it a mile away. But if you're just doing something to be authentic, so like even me starting this podcast, there was no intention behind it. Is, my business coach had said to me, you should write your story, because someone out there needs to read your journey. Like someone is where you were and they need that story. And I sat down and started, writing. And then I get too bogged up in the minutiae of, should this be chapter 1 or chapter 3? Or have I spent too long on this? And where do I start? Should I start on the day I was born? And I went, okay. So I shelved it and I put it to the side. And then, in my day job, I do host a podcast for this company. So I was like, I could just create a podcast and just talk about my journey. And because that's it, like writing for you was easy.
Yeah.
Talking to a screen, like I never rewatch it. I never re-listen, because God knows that's not cool. Although my wife does delight in making me watch it on the big TV in the lounge room. Sometimes I'm like, oh, do we have to again? I don't need to see my face. But for me, it's like, this is my way of telling my story and going, even if nobody listened, cool. It's giving me clarity and processing the journey.
Yeah.
And then and weirdly, like I don't promote it. I don't really talk about it, because you can't go into someone's Facebook group and say, hey, check out my podcast. Look at me. But organically, because I'm being authentic, people have been drawn to it, like, picking up followers and views and comments and people joining the school community, because they're like, no, I got something out of what you said. And it's been the weirdest thing, because I haven't done anything with it. And like people are like, following, and you get likes and you get subscribing. You're like, but this is me being completely authentic in this space, more so than I have been at any other point in my life. So and I think,
oh, sorry, I'm just so excited. Like, there's a few things that I absolutely love about your story. So I'm a huge cheerleader for people sharing their stories. I think that is how we heal the world. That's how we connect with each other. We need more storytelling. Because there is one queer memoir out about a woman coming out at 38 years old doesn't mean that there can't be several more that are very
Yeah.
similar, but are still going to have their own unique twist to them. And so
Mm.
I really encourage people who feel brave enough to share their story when they can. But
Mhm.
the thing is, like you said, not everybody loves to write. And so it's awesome when you can find your medium of like, I love podcasting and that's how I'm going to share. Some
Yep.
people are great at those like super short sound bites on social media. And
Yep.
it's like
You're
you
amazing.
can be changing someone's life by your 30-second video where you
Mm.
share what happened in your life and they go, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one.
Yep.
So
Or
love
another
it.
way to think about it.
But if you do want to write your book, let's talk. We'll do a whole
Yeah.
nother podcast. We'll work through the barriers.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my
It's
other jam. I love it.
my wife is still very adamant. You still need to write it. And I'm like, I just get, yeah, I get bogged down. And then I'm like, I never know where to start. And I said, no, it's going to read my book. And then when I had said to him, I said, oh, the podcast, I've like added, however many subscribers in the first 2 episodes. And he went, yeah, I hate it when I'm right. I'm like, God, screw you. But, you know, I agree with you. And I'm big on the power of storytelling. One of my side projects I do is a service where I can go and video someone and they'll tell their life story and I'll edit it and give it back to them and they can keep it. They can give it to somebody or they could not or whatever. And I recently went and sat with 3 ladies in their 90s, 3 sisters. And it was such a privilege to sit there and listen to their recollections through their life and their journey and just to see the bond that they still have, at the age they're at. And, a couple of them are starting to get, dementia, but they all helped each other. It's like, well, you'd remember more about that. Go, oh yeah, I remember those beach days and da, da, da. And I'm sitting there going, this is my purpose, is to bring these stories to life, even though it's not publicly, but they're going to see it. And that's why then through the podcast is like, I want to have amazing people on like you, or just everyday people as well, who here's a space for you to tell your story. If you never share the episode, that's cool. Like, it's not to generate anything. It's, here's a space I'm going to hold for you that you can tell your story and why yours is different to mine, but we've still walked that same path of coming out, later. And I was on a podcast the other week, the Rainbow Remix podcast, and they're awesome, awesome ladies, and talking about that when you come out later in life and like, you had kids and businesses and I only had a husband and a shared dog, but you come out and you've got this whole U-Haul of baggage that you bring with you of life experience. Someone who's fortunate enough to come out now when they're 15, 16, 20, they don't have all that stuff to drag with them. They can just go, yeah, I'm here, I'm queer, like, let's roll with it. And everyone goes, cool, you do you, boo, and away you go. But coming out later in life, is its whole separate journey. And when I was reading your book, I was like, oh, that could have been me, or that sounds like me. Then there are differences as well in everybody's story. And that's, people tend to focus on how hard it is and it's messy, it's confusing, it's all sorts of stuff. But it's also incredibly beautiful and rewarding when you can get to, not that I think we ever get to the other side of it, but through it.
I like to think I do. I tell myself in my head though, I'm like, we're past all the hard stuff. Life is all good now.
That's what I keep saying. And then suddenly something pops up. You're like, oh, I've got to do this bit again. But when you can look back even on that messy stuff, you start to see the beauty in it and the growth and what it took for you to do that. But I don't think we celebrate that enough and also have enough stories, because people aren't telling their stories, that you don't have to suffer. Right. It doesn't have to be insanely hard. You don't have to be sitting there feeling alone, because there is the opportunity that you will find someone and you can have something you never ever thought you would have. And I think we need more of those stories to come out, that there's good stuff that happens that makes all this messy stuff worthwhile.
Absolutely. Well, and honestly, so my book was originally titled A Chronic Case of Hetero, which I thought was
I loved
hilarious.
it.
Like I was like, that's the winner. That's so good. Unfortunately, the sales team was like, we are not selling a book with that title. And so they really pushed me to like try and come up with something else. And we went through a lot of different names. And at the end of the day, I'm so grateful now in hindsight that we landed on perfectly queer, because as you pick up very quickly in my story, I am a perfectionist.
Yep.
Now like a recovering perfectionist. But in my mind, in my past, I viewed queerness as a less than, and would not allow myself to even remotely accept that I might be queer, because that couldn't be part of a perfect life. And so the fact that I have my life story now, and that I can see the words perfect and queer together, and that I found out that my queerness is the most perfect life for me. Like I love that. It's a love note to myself, but it's a love note to so many people in the community too, that that you are perfect as you were created to be, as what you're living into. And yeah, I wanted that story with a happy fucking ending, because I was
Yeah.
so tired of like, somebody's got to die in the end, or we're all going to suffer, whatever. I had heard so many horror stories when I came out. Everybody wants to share their worst case scenario with you. You come out like, I met a lesbian once and she was alone with her cat for the rest of her life.
Yeah.
And so the fact that, yes, I had struggle. Yeah, the messy middle was messy and all. But I also found my wife, Jen. She, my son called her the missing piece to our family, because they have such a special connection together. There's so much good, more good than I could have ever anticipated in my life that's happened since coming out, since living in alignment. So really, even if like queerness is not your thing, if it's something else that you're masking or you're hiding or you're not living into, like aligning with that and then seeing how it can change your life with your friends, in your career, financially, whatever, any aspect, with your banana farm. Like it doesn't matter. Like everything can get better.
And you do, when you start living like authentically and with whatever that is, you actually develop this peace and this freedom. And I remember that someone, a member said to me once, gave me, so just sent me a text saying, you're doing really well on everything lately. I've always felt like you walk around with a perpetual chip on your shoulder. You're always fighting a battle. And that did stick with me. And I thought about it over many years. And then when I did go through the process of like coming out, I was like, I'm not fighting anymore. And I looked back on that message and I went, I was always trying to prove people wrong. Like, so growing up as a child and teenager, small country town, I was a bit of a tomboy. I was not like the other kids. So it was like, you must be, a dyke or gay or butch or whatever, and they were derogatory terms.
Right.
And so I was so determined to be not what everyone else said I was. So then I set up my life to be not that. And I wanted what everybody else had. So, when I met my husband, I did love him, but I think I was more in love with the idea of having what, so I had to go one better than my sister's wedding and just do the things. And it was a very out of body experience. So I felt I was managing a project, not like the greatest day of my life. But then when I started being free and just going, well, this is who I am, I was like, oh, I'm not fighting anymore. And that's tiring. Like when you don't realize it at the time, but when you get out the other side of it and you can look back, you're like, oh my God, every day was a fight about, I've got to prove myself. I've got to prove them wrong. I've got to, there was a laundry list of things that I was carrying around. Once I didn't have to do that and go, well, this is who I am. If you don't like me, cool. Someone else will. Way better on my energy and my creativity and my ability just to make decisions. I wasn't trying to do the right thing.
Right. Absolutely. It becomes so much more freeing. For me, my situation was a little bit different. I was the type of person who was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. So if something good would happen to me, I couldn't enjoy it because I'm like, well, now the bad thing comes. And it was a self-fulfilling prophecy that would happen, where it was like, good thing that would only make me anxious, and then the bad thing. And I have realized that I don't know when that self-talk went away, but I can't remember it for the past few years. Now good things happen and I'm like, what else good is going to happen? Like I just expect good things. You know, and again, I'll put a little disclaimer, results may vary. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
so
energy, you know, attracts energy. And if you can have a self-fulfilling prophecy that the bad thing is going to happen, then
right.
it works exactly the same in reverse. It,
Yeah.
you know, doesn't matter what your belief system is, but, you know, we're all big balls of energy walking around on this giant big ball of energy. And what you put out there is, you know, whether it be positive or negative, that's going to be, you know, what you get. Like, you can't perform miracles just thinking positively, but if you are, you know, expecting good things, you will find more good things. It's like when you go looking for yellow cars, what do you see? 1,000 yellow cars on the road.
Exactly. Exactly.
So we take our blinders off. In your story, so when you went through this, you know, you were, you know, married, you, for all intents and purposes, to anyone driving past the white picket fence, they go, well, Jillian's got the perfect life. She's amazing. She's doing the thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
look at that. What was the point where you got to when I don't fit anymore in my skin?
Mm. That's really tricky to say because the my coming out process in the book was so long. I mean, the
Mm,
realization from the first time when I think I was about 24 years old when I met my first out lesbian and I first heard the word lesbian used in a non-derogatory way and realizing like, oh my gosh, they exist. Like this is real. And this person I met, like she's proud of it and she's happy about it. And like, this doesn't
mm,
fit any story I've ever been told about lesbians before. It took, you know, another 14 years from there until I could finally come out. And it honestly wasn't until, so I came out in a craniosacral therapy session. And for anyone who's not familiar with craniosacral work, it's a type of body work um, that they work all over the body on the physical structures of the body, but it also works with the energy of the body and it works with the memories and emotions that we trap in our tissues.
mhm.
Sounds a little woo. Trust me,
I've heard
people, I
about
used
it.
to be an accountant and somehow I got there. Okay. So read into it. You can, you know, so I went into this craniosacral therapy session. I had zero intention of coming out in the session. That was not even a thought on my mind. And as the practitioner was working over an area of my body, she said, "What's here?" And the memories, the emotions, the words all started just flooding my brain and then flooding my eyes. The tears were filling up like, don't tell her, no, I cannot believe this is what's coming up. But she's part of the LGBTQ community. I knew she was a safe person that I could come out
Mm,
to. And so I said, I don't even remember exactly what I said. It's in the book. I can't remember if I said I'm gay or I'm not straight or something like that.
mm,
And she responded with, that's wonderful. And it was so affirming and
mm,
so loving. It was such a nice way to come out. And it's the first time I remember feeling unconditional self-love and feeling whole in my
mm,
body. It's like that there wasn't that gaping emptiness inside anymore. And I wasn't
mm,
just living in my head anymore. I was like, oh, I have elbows and knees and hips that hurt. And like, but I felt like a whole person. And so that moment was just incredible because not only did I love myself in that moment, but I could accept myself.
mm,
I think the acceptance piece really was like that final locking in of this is you, your
mm.
whole you, and you know, love it and live it now. Now, granted, I got up from the table and then realized, like, oh, I have to hop in my minivan and drive home to my husband and kids right now. So it wasn't all magical from there. That
No,
started my new relationship with Jack Daniel's whiskey and amongst other things.
yeah. It's like things like my wife will always and I always get the quote wrong, but you know, there are no mistakes in this life. You wind up exactly where you're meant to be, you know, at any point in time. Like we wish that we had like another a full life together, like we'd met
Mhm.
in our 20s. But we also know then we wouldn't have what we have now,
Right.
because we have to have that lived experience. And I talked before about, like our U-Haul of baggage, but that's nothing to hide from. Like when you've got the right timing and the right place to unpack that, you can actually appreciate then what you have.
For
So
sure.
if you'd come to this realization 14 years prior and actually done it then, may have been totally different, outcome, because you don't have the life lessons and experiences to equip you, even though we didn't feel really equipped to go on this journey, to equip you for that and to help you understand that feeling of this is okay.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
like I found, like I I always knew there was something, but I didn't know what it was, and I definitely was not putting my hand up to say I was gay, because I'm like that's not where we're at. But I knew there was something. And in 2010, I had my first relationship with a woman, and I was like, oh, that's suddenly all these things that I'd struggle with, like intimacy and connection and stuff. It was just easy as, like, it just was 100% natural. And I was like, uh-oh, this was not on my bingo card in 2010. This is not what it was going to be. I'm married, I've got this. How do I even reconcile this thing? And it took me a long time then to, even within me, probably that 14-year period almost, 10 years before, and I could never see myself leaving that safe environment that I was in, where I was really, now when I look back, I was existing. I was doing the things, go to work, pay the bills, pat the dog, talk to the cat, go to bed, get up, do it all again. And it wasn't until I met my now wife that I was like compelled to act and to change that situation, because I was like, I'm standing on one side of the bridge and I can see this amazing life over here. And I'm compelled to, I can't just keep saying, oh, well, I'll just push it to the side. Like, I'm compelled to act. But for me to get there, I've got to do these things first. And
Yeah.
then as I started, was actually my business coaches were the first people I came out to. It was one day I'd been having therapy and stuff, and I said to them one day on the call, I said, oh, so I think I'm gay. And they went, well, good. We're glad you got here. It saved us asking you awkward questions in a few weeks, but we've been waiting. So they had figured out, like, that they knew that through just talking through my business and just general stuff, that I wasn't happy and didn't belong where I was.
Wow.
And then the next week at the end of the call, because then that's how I was telling people. I just told a few friends going, yeah, I think I'm gay. And the next week at the end of the call, they said to me, oh, we need you to say one thing before you go. And I went, oh, yeah, cool. What do you need? And he's like, you need to say I'm gay. And I went, yeah, I did last week, bro. Did you not listen? You cried. Like, there were tears. And he went, no. You said, I think I need you to own it. And that was such a powerful moment, because I'm like, oh, that word think in there was like kind of a little bit of an out and a little bit of a, just test the waters. And then when I said it, I was like, I just felt this, this thing lift, as like, oh, yeah, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Like that I'd taken off a big heavy coat.
That's
And I would regularly come home to, before she was clearly my wife, but my partner, and I'd come home each day and say, so I told XYZ today that I'm gay. And she's like, okay, didn't know you were going to do that. How did that go? Because I just have coffee with someone and say, so I need to talk to you. I need to tell you this is where I'm at. And they're like, most of my friends were either, well, duh, or thanks for catching up with the rest of us, or that's amazing. Are you okay? Are you well? Are you happy? Okay, good. And there was no non-issues.
Now, can I ask though, did you have any amount of fear every time, or did you get over that initial fear and then you're like, I'm good, I'm gay?
Yeah, no, there was the fear every time, because like my now ex-husband, like I had started to tell some people, he was 6 months into it before I could have the conversation with him, because I thought that the world would end and everything would blow up and it'd be this horrible thing. And it wasn't. Like, we're still incredibly good friends. We co-parent the dog. My mum still lives in the house. Like, it's no, thing. My wife comes down there. She helps out with things. We catch up we have Christmas and we're in and out all the time. Like, no big deal. But I was so worried. And also some of my friends are, religious. So I thought, oh, how are they going to go? And they've known me as this Lisa, not over here. And they were amazing. But each time I was like, I was waiting for the time when someone would go, well, you're a disgrace, or that's terrible, or you're a bad person. Because those were narratives I'd been telling myself all along. It's like, you're going to upend everybody's lives. They didn't ask for this. They didn't deserve this. They're good people. No one asked for you to go and decide I think something in your book that resonated is like that, I made all these commitments and these vows and these responsibilities, and now, so I should stick to that because that's what I said. But, when I started going through that process is like, and even now today, because I find that on this journey, we have to come out all the bloody time.
All the time.
Like, all the time. It's like, and there's so many labels and everything else. But like, even we went and we had a haircut the other day, and the guy who did our hair, he was like, oh, you guys sisters. No, she's my wife. And it's just, but in some small way, you have to come out every single day, which is not typical, for the heterosexual community, because it's like the automatic assumption is you are X. So then when you go, Y, then it's a bit trickier. But
that's why it's always funny to me when people are like, well, you don't need to come out. And it's like, well, sometimes I have the option and sometimes I have the choice. But the other day when I had the man coming to install the fence in my yard and he only spoke Spanish, and I said, I need to talk to my esposa. And he laughed and said, no, you mean esposo. And I was like, no, I know my Spanish is bad, but it's esposa. When you have a gendered language, that outs you. I mean, there's so many different ways that people don't even think of. It's not like, we show up and, by the way, I need to show you my rainbow t-shirt before I mail this package in the post office. Like, that's not how it happens. But it is all these small interactions of, is your husband home to talk about the security system?
Yeah.
Like,
or
yes, her name is Jen. She's lovely.
and it's that constant process. And you're like, but every time I'm still always waiting for that one that's going to be, a dick about it, for want of a better term. Like, we moved to a relatively small country town, like it's 1,500 people where we live.
Wow.
And I was like, well, I wonder how they're going to go, because I know the old country town that I grew up in, it's still not cool. Like, the gossip mill that kicked off once somebody out there found out about my life. Suddenly I got a message from a school friend who we've been Facebook friends for years, but never really messaged me, going, oh, so a little birdie told me that, and I'm like, well, let me figure out where did you hear it? And then I found out where they heard it. I knew where it came from. I went, I haven't lived in that town since 1995, and it's still news. Like, my mother hasn't lived in that town since 2009. So when we came out here, I was like, we'll see. And no one batted an eye, because we'll walk down the street holding hands, or, I don't think I've called my wife by her actual Christian name for a million years, or first name. Bub, love, whatever, and that's what we do. And even we've been involved in some community activities, and people have been amazing. That's awesome. Amazing. We actually went to, they had a horse racing carnival at the thing at the end of the street. So we went, and there was a lady on the gate who I've known through and being involved with some things. She's probably getting mid-70s. So she's that older generation. And we were talking about my photography, and she said to Sharon, well, you take lovely photos too. And I turned around and said, well, she's got a good teacher. And this lady fired back quick as a shot. She goes, well, it helps when she sleeps with the teacher, doesn't it? We were like, we did not expect that to come from her whatsoever. But there was still just that moment of, should I say this even about, like, she's got a good teacher, or, because you just wait for the reaction.
Right.
I think I've had a couple of people who were in my friends group who were, oh, right. I was like, okay, you've now just moved yourself to the next circle out. Like, here's the tribe, and then we're just extending out now.
That's true. It really helps you find your people and find your not people.
Yeah.
Which is okay. I mean, that it's hard when you're in it in the
Mm.
moment. It's one of those things I think in hindsight you realize is such a gift that, the people who love you for the way you are, that's who you want to be around. And I think before I came out, I was so concerned about if my family would accept me, if my friends would
Mm.
accept me, and this and that. And then I realized that by not coming out, that I was only allowing them to know me as a lie. And so I'm like,
Mm.
well, what kind of relationship is that? Like, that's not a
Mm.
real relationship either. So,
Yeah.
but not that
It's
it's not hard, because I'm sure there's people out, like I had family members who blocked me on Facebook.
mm.
I have siblings that I don't speak with
Yeah.
anymore, unfortunately. Um, but also, there have been so many people from my small hometown who have come out of the woodwork and said, I am so proud of you. And
Mm.
also, here's my story. I mean, there's
Yeah.
something about putting yourself out vulnerably too that
Mhm.
holds that space for other people to do the same. And that is incredible.
It is. And I know when I've had some messages or comments from people going, "Oh, where was this 6 years ago when I was going through this?" Or, "I wish I had heard this perspective," or whatever. And, "Thank you for sharing your story because I feel less alone." Like, I was like, I'm just me sitting behind my desk just talking. But you realize that, you know, I read, and I think most of us did, Untamed by
Oh,
Glennon
yeah.
Doyle. And I remember reading that going, "Oh, this is, oh, okay." But you see that it can be done
Right.
in a healthy way. And, we're not all going to lock eyes with somebody across the room that we don't even know. And, her and Abby's story, but you're like, there can be a happy ending where everyone gets along and everyone finds their place and their peace.
Yeah. My
But,
ex-husband's girlfriend bought me that book,
oh,
which I totally love.
I saw Glennon on a podcast with Brene Brown. I was like, I need
Mm.
to read this book. And I just demolished the book. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, so many things connected. Then the dots in my head. I was like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to get from where I am now to that place, but I feel like that's home.
Right.
And I feel like with the people that decided that, I wasn't their jam anymore, or didn't fit their narrative, it's, well, that's okay, but that version of me doesn't exist anymore. And
Also true.
I'm grateful for your part in, not that we had a conversation, but I'm grateful for your part in my story all the way through, and I've accepted that. And I've got to a point now where I don't expect someone else's validation for doing what's best for Lisa, whereas Lisa spent 46 and a half years doing what was best for everybody else.
Right.
And now it's about, we've got some health issues with my mum and stuff. And, my wife and I are saying, well, how are we going to deal with this? How are we going to, do we need to move closer? And we're like, and I said, well, no, this is like our piece here where we, when I come through that garage door, I'm like, this is, we need to protect that space and that energy, that this is our place. And it's a, one step removed from everything. And, filtering everything we now do through that lens is like, is this going to spark joy? Does this fill my cup? No? Well, guess what? It doesn't have time in our schedules anymore. Like, don't go chasing projects just for something to do.
Right.
Like, do the ones that are important to you and mean something to you, and then just cut the rest loose, because you don't need that validation to be useful to someone anymore. Like, you just got to do what's right for you in this moment.
Yeah. Great advice. Lisa,
Yeah.
I have a question though. Is
Yeah.
your wife also a later in lifer, or is she
Yes.
what I would call a vintage gay? Okay.
No. She's later in life as well.
Oh.
So, yeah. So she was probably, came out probably maybe a year or two before we sort of met.
Okay.
But even then she hadn't, it wasn't like she lived in a smaller town at that time as well. So it wasn't like she could, have a big community to be part of. She just started to realize, and then she had her catalyst relationship. She's like, oh, this is why it hasn't worked with, anyone else. And she did a lot of work through her life to heal traumas and stuff from childhood, and get past a lot of those triggers and things to be able to even, she never thought she could have a relationship with somebody, let alone live in a house with them. And, you know, how is that going to be? And it's just, we've just seamlessly just fit. And she had triggers come up and we just worked through that. Like, and because we're so secure in our relationship, she wasn't worried about the fact that, you know, me extricating from this marriage and dealing that. She's just like, you do what you need to do. I'm not going to give you a time frame. Like, we'll just do this together.
That's
and
amazing.
So we've both had our life journeys that have brought us to this point that we can appreciate what we've got and respect it because we had to wait so long for it.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think it's interesting because I know I personally had a lot of fears about coming out in midlife and like, how am I ever going to find someone and how am I going to date and who wants a mom who drives a minivan and has 2 kids and like doesn't remember if she put deodorant on that day. And gosh, where was I going with this in my brain? Oh, yes. The thing that I found that was so wonderful about dating in midlife is that you have a better sense of what you want. And it sounds like your wife too, also to have the maturity to say, hey, I know you're not where you want to be right now, and you've got to get some ducks in a row first. And also, I trust you to do that. And I'm going to give you the space to do that. And my wife, Jen, did the same. I mean, when we first met, my divorce paperwork still hadn't even been submitted yet. But I was, you know, very confident at that point that we were going to get divorced. But it was in meeting her and her saying, like, you know, you have some steps that you need to take. Granted, we were also long distance. We lived 936.3 miles apart.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so we went on one date, and then the rest of our relationship, so much of it was just conversation. And that gave me the space to get a lot of the stuff done that I needed to get done so that I was showing up for her in the way that I wanted to. But I was a walking red flag. I mean, we talk about red flags all the time.
Yeah.
And that's Jill, that was you.
And in the community, like if you are still married, even if you're, you know, leaving that or you're separated, people will not give you the time of day. Yeah. There's still, and I understand there's been a lot of bad experiences, a lot of wariness, and I get the reasons why, but it's very hard. And people can be in our community judgy, really like, oh, well, you're not a gold star, or you've had a life before. Well, haven't we all? And, you know, Sharon and I formed our relationship similar to yours. She was about 300 kilometers from me. So we spent a lot of time, we built a foundation of friendship before, you know, the next thing. Like her intention at the start was, well, I'm not falling in love with you. I'm not going down that path. And one of her friends said, don't you fall in love with her? She goes, I'm not going to. And I was like, just being my normal self and checking in and being a good friend to her, even like from long distance. And she's like, oh, wow, these are really good qualities. And no one else around me is doing that kind of thing. But, you know, it can be hard. Like when you, like I was in the fortunate position that I, you know, my business coach often says, you landed on a cloud, man. Like you got lucky. You hit the jackpot, you know, first at bat, like you were, you know, there's, but even for people who are going through the process of then going, well, how do I date? What do I do? And they want to, you know, rush in and go, oh my God, someone spoke to me. This is the one.
Right.
It's okay to build that foundation first of understanding their values and understanding your values. And then, okay, what are the obstacles here? And then how do we navigate them together? Like nothing was ever a problem with Sharon and I. Like it was just like, okay, this made me feel this way. So we would just talk about it. Asterisk, her trade as a counselor. So we do a lot of talking.
So many words.
A lot of, I always say she'll be looking at me and said, stop therapizing me. And, you know, but we would go and I go, okay, now I understand where you're coming from. Let's work through that. If it was a trigger or something. And now none of those things ever come up.
Yeah.
And I could give her that security that she needed to go, I'm going to navigate this with you. You don't have to be worried I'm running back there or whatever else. Like, this is the leap I never thought I would make. And you are the reason I'm making the leap.
Yeah. Well, you should write her a very nice Google review because she
Yeah.
sounds fabulous.
5-star.
Very good. Yeah. Well, and listen, I mean, as much as I would like to say that I am perfect in the way that I do everything, I have my fair share of dating what the fucks in the book
Yep.
as well. So
Yeah.
there were lessons I needed to learn, and I'm, again, I don't regret any of them. I'm grateful I went through them, because having that contrast showed me what I wanted,
Mm.
because I knew what I didn't want.
Yeah.
Knew what I had. I was like, this is a no. This type of, my first few relationships that I got into. So that was really good. I mean, it's just, I hate to be cliche, and then it's like, if it's not a positive experience, it's a learning experience. But really, there is so much to learn from those moments that
And
don't
that's how you survive them. That's how you get through those, is
right.
if you sit there and go, everything's bad, the whole world's shit, like there's no one out there, everyone is terrible. That's all you're going to see. But if you go, what did I learn from it? Could I have done better? Or at the very least, well, hand on heart, I was a good person. What did I learn out of it? Okay, well, I narrowed down now. I don't like X, Y, Z, and these are non-negotiables now.
Right.
Okay. And then you can just go forth again about the learning. And you're right. People say, oh, that's so cliched, but it's actually a way that you can keep moving forward without getting stuck in this is so hard. One of the things, like in reading your story, I wanted to ask you is like, did you ever get to the point, or maybe you are, maybe you aren't, at that point where you feel like, I'm through the other side and this is all worth it?
Yes. Well, so the last chapter of the book is called Worth It.
Oh, there you go.
It was written in real time. So all of my other chapters, I kind of wrote as the memories would like divinely download into my head, and I'd write in the morning and whatever. The last chapter, it was, 5:00 in the morning or so, 6:00 in the morning. And I was visiting Jen at her home in Pennsylvania. And I just woke up and was so happy in that moment to just have her next to me. There was nothing else going on. It was just such a calm and peaceful time. And I reflected back on everything I had been through in the years prior. And I was like, it was all worth it just for this moment that I have right here. Like, if this is as good as it ever gets in my life, I'm so glad that I have this moment here with her this morning. And then the words kept coming to me. So I got out of bed and put on my sweatpants and like went out to the couch, and then she ended up coming out too. And as she's walking into the living room, I'm typing, and Jen walks into the living room and sits down on the couch with me. I mean, it literally was written like in real time as it was happening, which is kind of not super romantic, but also I loved it as the ending for the book, because that's the message that I wanted to send to everyone. Like, I know how hard it is. I didn't realize until I had to go back and record the audiobook, because I hadn't read my whole story from start to finish. And so doing the audiobook, I got really choked up because I forgot how hard it was. And I even thought like, oh my gosh, could I go through that again? Like, if now knowing everything that I went through, could I do that again? I wouldn't change a thing. Knowing where I am now, it's like, okay, sure, whatever, it was absolutely worth it to do it. And so it's really such an honor and a pleasure when I have people reach out to me who are just starting their journey, or even questioning, or they're in their messy middle and they're like, this is awful. And I can just sit there and say, I know. I know. I've been there too. And sometimes, just like you said, that other person knowing that they're not alone in it, and validating their feelings, and letting them share what they need to share, even though they may feel so weird in where their life is in that moment. Like, yeah, there's a whole community of us. We've all been there in slightly different ways, but we've all been there. We know how much this hurts. We know how hard it is. We know the games your mind plays with you. And it will be worth it. It can be worth it. but you have to keep moving forward.
And it does take, it's the, the word that sticks to me is work. Like you have to keep working at it, like working on yourself. Like you can't just go, well, I'm coming out as gay and I'm going to divorce and I'm just going to set up a new life and I'm going to have my new happily ever after, because all the patterns and narratives and stories that you have about yourself, you need to be able to dig through those and unpack them, because you're just that's going to hold you back in being able to be truly free. So it does take work, which is when I came up with the idea of the name of the podcast, because
the best name of the podcast ever.
My business coach would joke, because when we moved to this rural area, I'd send him photos of cows, and so we had the birds out the back, and he's like, "Are you wearing your gay farmer overalls?" And I'm like, "You're such a dick." And he would laugh at it all the time, talking about, my overalls. Did you put your overalls on while you did that? And so when I was thinking of the name, I just kept coming back to that. But the other thing that kind of stuck with me then, as I landed on the name, and then I was thinking about it, I thought, well, the overalls are really a good metaphor, that when we got to go and do work, you put overalls on, because the work is hard, it's dirty, it's messy. So I'm going to work, but they're also a good metaphor for I'm using them to cover things up right now, like the bits that, I want to protect. So I thought, well, it's actually really fitting for a name, but it's that analogy of like, there's so much work you have to do to be ready for the next person.
For sure.
And the next thing, and to understand that you deserve it, because if you still feel like a shitbag human for turning everyone else's lives upside down in your old version of you, you're just going to bring that guilt and stuff forward, and then you're not going to be free and give that person the gift of who you really are.
Right.
But I think we get scared to do that work, and sometimes it's hard to know where to start to do that work.
Yeah. Oh, I made excuses for it at first. It was like, well, I don't have money. I'm going through a divorce. We run a small business together. And I realized that it was not something I could navigate alone, and that we're not supposed to as humans. And at the same time, I don't know why my brain wouldn't use Google. Like, I didn't find any of the lesbian communities on social media or anything. I wasn't on TikTok yet at that point. I thought it was just me and Sir Elton John that were like the only two people who would come out after having a heterosexual marriage. But I met a few different therapists and life coaches, and I realized that investing in myself, which again, too, was really hard as a mom. I was so used to pouring all of my resources into the kids. So to take some of our precious limited money and say, I need this for me, was a really big move. And it has paid dividends. I mean, it was so worthwhile. I needed that talk therapy. I needed those life coaches. And so, when I meet people who are like, well, it's just not an option. And I'm like, well, you need to try and figure out how to make it an option if you can. Like,
what's the return on that investment? It's
right.
You could have poured those resources into your kids and it's just going to get consumed up. But now it's a investment that keeps giving back to them for the rest of their lives, because you are, completely you and able to be fabulous and amazing. And they get that rather than this tormented version, which is half the mum that they, really deserve.
Right.
And I think when people are looking at somewhere to find someone, they need to also understand it's a little bit like dating. You're not going to find the right fit. Like, you need to go and have a conversation and go, nope, that didn't, if someone's telling you what you should be thinking and feeling, then no, that's not the right fit. But if someone's prepared to ask you a question and hold spot, like for me, it was my business coaches. Like, I went to them talking about, why can't I get my staff to do what I want them to do? And why was I so polarizing for people? People either really love me or really hated me, and they flicked from one to the other really quick. And I'm like, I don't understand it. Turned out it was me. Like, it's me, because you're fighting yourself all the time. And that's,
I feel like that's always the answer, though. They're like, it's you, darling. It's you.
Yeah. Wherever I go, there I am is
right. Exactly.
they would hold space for me, and I'd never had that in life where someone would say, so why is that a struggle for you? And then they just sit there and wait for an answer. And then so you fumble around with words and they're like, yeah, that's a good manufactured answer, but what's the answer?
Yeah.
And then they just keep asking me, why is that a struggle? Why is this a problem? Why do we keep coming back here? And you're like, what aren't you saying? And then you're like, oh. And then when you have someone do that, then I suddenly was like, I don't want to have small conversations with people anymore.
Yeah.
Like when I ask you, how are you? I really want to know, how are you? Not, yeah, I'm fine. No, well, what does fine mean? What is fine? Like
my response is always, how much time do you have?
Yeah. How much wine is in the bottle? But we need, when you find the right space, it's easy to be whatever it is that you need to be, and to have someone who's going to hold the space. And not every person selling an online program which helps you live your best gay life is necessarily doing it from the right place or the right intent. So you need to be prepared to have conversations and find that fit. But I 100% agree that you can't do it alone.
Right.
Because, we are tribal, we're a pack animal. We like to move in tribes, and we weren't meant to do this stuff by ourselves.
Yeah.
It's just too hard.
And even, with therapists and coaches too, there's some who are really good at their job. And I found that they were really helpful at first. And then I found that I outgrew them also.
Yes.
It was almost like I was evolving so fast. They had their secret sauce that they were magic at. They helped me with that piece. And then it was like, thank you so much. Now I need to find this next person who has this magic to help me with this.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. I mean, it's part of their field and it's part of the business.
And it is. And it's you've got to realize it's not about them. Like your journey is not about them. You get what you need from it, and then you find someone who can take the next step and the next step. Like, we're all evolving, and maybe you're at the limit of where they've evolved to or where they've chosen to focus on. And it's okay to have multiple. Like, I'm restarting therapy next week with someone completely different, because I was like, that got me this far.
Right.
But by the end, I'd sort of had that same feeling, like I'd outgrown it, and that we were just doing the same thing over and over. So now I'm doing something different because, here are some things I need to focus on. Yeah. And you need to have that tribe. And I remember when I said to my now ex-husband that, hey, so I'm gay and probably not what you thought you might hear or didn't hear. And he was like, and I said, like, you deserve to be happy. I'm not the person who can make you happy. And he'd sent me a message later. I said, I don't want you to be a stranger around because we owned a gym together. But he said, you're going to need your circle, because no doubt there'll be some difficult times for you as you navigate this whole process. He said, so, you need to pull those people in close, which you couldn't have asked for anything more giving and more gracious. But, understanding you need that circle and you need to cultivate that. Yeah. So that you've got those people when you're just having a day where it's like hard to be me, that there's someone that you can look at and they go, I got you, right. And I hear, and you don't even need to talk about it.
Yeah.
But they just know.
That was my group of homeschool mom friends. And really, when I look back at my entire life, I had friends growing up here and there, but it wasn't until I was an adult and homeschooling my children that I found that group of women where I really felt that I could say anything and that I could be myself, and for the first time in my life. And what perfect timing, because, it was just a few years later that I ended up coming out to all of them. And that's a chapter in the book too, where I talk about what that was like over a game of truth or dare. So
that's the ultimate game.
Player at, I'm awful at truth or dare. Terrible. Don't play that game. If you have hidden secrets, do not play truth or dare, and don't pick truth.
Yeah, that's not the one you want to go for.
No.
It's really interesting, the navigating the circles of, you've almost got to, as coming out later in life, you've built a life, you've built an identity that, for me, it was 46 and a half years of life that people knew this Lisa. And then I'm saying, well, now I'm like a 4-year-old into a new identity, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Like, you know, what do I wear? Do we need gay friends? Do we need, you know, like we watched the Sydney Mardi Gras the first year we were together on TV, and we're like, I don't think we're that kind of gay. That's not our thing. And we're just going, no, that's not us. And trying to find where you fit, but you've got these circles, like you've got to navigate old friendships, but then how do you get new friends? Because I'm too old to make new friends. Like, how do you even make friends now? Like, what do you do?
And do we even want to? I mean, can't we just put on our overalls and go work in the garden and call
it?
Yeah,
and just hang out on the farm and listen to the cows.
Just, like, send little emojis and memes to people. And we're good.
And
I'm that kind of lesbian.
Yeah, that's what we like. Just I'd like to be at home, and if you're going to invite me out, it has to be a lunchtime event. Evenings are now off my radar. It's like, if it's 6 p.m, I'm probably not coming. I might tell you I am, but I'm probably not.
I feel like this should be a written rule in the community, because I don't know that I've really met anyone who's like, I love going out late and I love to leave my home space. Like, no, that's no. So let's just we're all in agreement right now that let's keep it earlier and casual.
And, you know, let's just do it all online. But we're navigating these groups and these rules, and like family groups, and then you've got new family, like, you know, you've got your wife and sort of a new family with your kids, as well as the old family that you had. And it's challenging. And then we're always trying to find that balance, but in the middle of it, trying not to get lost in any of it again, because we live so much of our life being lost, and just still trying to redefine ourselves and understand that that's okay, and give ourselves a bit of grace. Like, I'm still learning. I've got my training wheels on, like, and that's okay. But we see people, like, even if you read Untamed, you'll see that story like, well, Glennon and Abby have got it all figured out. Well, I sure as shit know that they probably don't.
Right. They spill it all on their podcast too. Yeah. Like, they've got their own mess and things they're working through. Yeah, that reminds me of a message that I got actually after I had come out, and then, you know, with writing, with sharing out about the book, and I have a Substack that I write every week. And I had a guy that I knew back in college, and he sent me a note, and he's part of the LGBTQ community. And he's like, you know, I'm going to be honest, I was really surprised when you came out, because I always thought you were really homophobic. And I was like, kind of taken aback. And then I was thinking about it more, and I was like, well, yeah, no shit, Joe. I mean, I would have been in the closet if I was totally cool with, you know, with the LGBTQ identity. And like, I wish I could have been. And I don't remember being outwardly homophobic, but I'm sure, you know, there's all those like little microaggression things too. And I'm sure, like, I will own up, I'm sure that there were those in my conversations, because I was not comfortable with owning that identity for myself. But it was interesting to me, because it's like, I almost felt like he wasn't allowing me the permission to be allowed to change and grow and learn and work through that internalized homophobia. And then in turn, I realized I was kind of doing the same to other people in my life when I would come out and they wouldn't react kindly. And I would peg them as that person in that moment. And there were people who legitimately did the work so that we could bridge our relationship back together. But I think if we time capsule the people we know, it's really not fair, because we keep growing as people. So, you know,
it's expecting them to keep up, but we can't even keep up with our own trajectory. And it's like, well, you're disrespecting me because you can't keep up with what I've decided to be today. It's like, well, can you give me some time to talk, because I've known you for this amount of time, and now I'm just knowing for this amount of time. It's not like changing gears in a car.
Right.
Yeah. It can be really hard.
Space that they can change too. And hopefully they do. And some people do and some people don't. And
I think that when we can accept ourselves, we can look at other people with a bit more grace and acceptance, and not think and understand that, well, I've been through this journey. I've been through this thing. I understand the work I've done to get here. And even if you come across an angry server at the coffee shop, like they're rude, well, you don't know, maybe their cat died that morning. Maybe maybe someone yelled at them, the 5 people before you even got there. It's not about you. It's something going on for them that I don't know what's going on for them. So all I can do is control me. So maybe I just need to have a little bit of grace and go, I hope your day gets better, or just something that, but it takes us doing that work for us to accept us, that we can then accept other people as they are, if we want them then to accept us as we are.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So, well, this has been amazing. We could probably chat all night, but I know the time zone differences. Where can people catch up with your stuff? So we know Perfectly Queer is available online.
Yes, there's an audiobook, there's an ebook, and a paperback. You can, people have told me they've found them in Australian bookstore or libraries. I know a lot of independent bookstores, if they don't have it on the shelf, they can order it for you, but also Amazon or any other major book retailer, you can find it. One of my favorite places to connect with people is on TikTok at Hello Jillian Abby. I do, and looking at you, Lisa, I do a co-writing. Well, we may have a time difference issue here, but I do a TikTok live every Monday and Wednesday at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. And basically it's a time where people can ask questions about sharing their story, about the publishing process, about the editing process, anything they want. It's an ask me anything time. And then we have a 45-minute co-working sprint where we just work. And I write. I'm working on a lesbian holiday rom-com right now.
Oh, look at.
So yeah, so follow me on TikTok. I also just post a lot of love notes there. So if you need some love, I will send you a love note on there. You can also follow me on Instagram at Jillian Abby Author, and on Substack. It's a free subscription on Substack, and it's Reframe with Jillian Abby.
Perfect. And I do follow your Substack, and I've enjoyed reading those articles and getting that through once I'd started to dig into your book. So I definitely will add you to my TikTok. I'm a TikTok watcher, not a TikTok doer necessarily.
That's fair.
But yes, I thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you carving out some time to have a chat, and I look forward to having you back on again so we can continue the conversation, because I think your story is particularly powerful and relevant, that you've been brave enough to put it out on so many platforms and so visibly. And I think that's we need more voices. So thank you for sharing yours and your story. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Lisa. And I hope to be wearing a pair of big gay overalls the next time I see you.
Yeah, well, I'll get them trademarked, get them designed up.
Yes.